Okay, we're going to do a pretty basic video here today. I'm going to show you how to clean your airbrush. This video kind of coincides with the last video I made pertaining to the Harbor Freight airbrush. I made a very important statement in that video. If you keep the airbrush clean, it's going to work. Now, that applies to that $20 airbrush, and that also applies to, you know, a $400 airbrush and anything in between. So learning how to clean your airbrush thoroughly is key. If you can't learn this, might as well put the airbrush down and call it quits. So I've got a cup full of paint here. First step is put this up here for you. And the first step is you dump your paint out. And I'll usually fill the cup up about halfway with lacquer thinner or whatever cleaner you're using. Shake it up good. Dump it. We'll do that a second time. Shake it up good. Dump it. Okay, now we're going to fill it up the third time. And we're going to start running lacquer thinner or cleaning fluid through the airbrush. While you're doing this, you want to plug the front of the airbrush up every now and then to backfeed the cleaner through the brush. Okay? And just those 3 easy steps will give you a clean enough airbrush, more times than not, to change colors. But we really want to clean this airbrush today. We're not just changing colors. We're actually going to clean this airbrush for storage. So we're going to run another one through. Yeah, you want to block the front of that airbrush, kick cleaner back through it. That loosens up any paint that might be stuck inside there. Okay? So, so for the most part, the color cup is clean. And wipe any excess paint off the body of your airbrush. Okay. Now we're going to break it down. First comes the back piece. Then you want to carefully remove the needle. And you'll notice you can run 1,000 cups of cleaner through this airbrush, and you're still going to be left with paint right where that needle sits, and that bushing in there, or on that seal rather. And we're going to remove the back piece, which on this airbrush, the Eclipse, the auxiliary lever is attached. Pull out the trigger. You're going to work on the front and pull the air cap off. And we do have, well, that's about useless, huh? Let's try this one. A lot of airbrushes come with this little tool, this little wrench to loosen up the nozzle housing. And you got to watch, most airbrushes do have a seal in the nozzle housing and the body of the brush. So we'll pull that out. And then the nozzle itself. Okay? So that's actually looking pretty good. make sure it's all cleaned up there. You're going to need something to get down into the airbrush. These work great. You can pick them up at Harbor Freight for about $1 a piece, or go online, eBay, get them for $1, $2 a piece. We're not going to go nuts here. We don't want to jam this down in there. Just put a little bit of thinner, the cleaner in the cup, let it run through. And just clean that area out from your airbrush. You just want to visually take a look down in there. And obviously if you see any dry paint or debris, you want to get it out of there. You want to make sure that the seat right here, where the seal is, you'll also want to make sure that that's clean. You don't want any dried paint or debris stuck there. Okay, so we're going to put this aside just for a second. You'll want to inspect your auxiliary lever, your guidance spring. There's no paint on them, and there's no point in cleaning them. If there is paint on them, clean it up. You want to inspect the nozzle, the air caps, make sure everything is cleaned under them. Make sure all the threads are also clean. You want to inspect the nozzle itself. A lot of these airbrushes actually have a fixed nozzle. The nozzle, this little teeny piece, is actually fixed to the front of the airbrush or connected to the air cap. You don't want to. The only time you want to take that off there is if it needs replaced. Otherwise, you just leave it on there and do the best that you can as far as cleaning. Usually your nozzle cleans out fairly well during the initial 4 or 5 cups of cleaner that we run through there. But you'll want to take a look at the outside of the nozzle, make sure there's nothing on the outside of the nozzle. When air comes out of the airbrush, air actually flows over top of this, the outside of the nozzle, and through your air cap here. So you just want to make sure everything's nice and clean. You don't want anything there to obstruct the airflow. Okay? And then you can go ahead, put that back on your airbrush. Fine. Oh, what do I do with my little wrench? When you put this back on, you just want to make that nice and snug. You don't want to over tighten it. Okay? Now you can pretty much put your brush back together. Like I said, just make sure there's no paint in any of these parts. If there is, clean it off. I'm going to drop the trigger in there first. Most airbrushes are basically the same. This one's going to maybe a little bit different than yours, but I mean all the parts are going to be there. Everything is generally the same. Some airbrushes are designed a little bit different than others though. So you want to get that back in there. Slip that needle back in your airbrush. Oh, we better clean that needle, huh? You want to make sure your needle is thoroughly cleaned. Okay. Now, once you have that needle back in there, you're going to want to move it back and forth, and you're going to want to feel the needle bottom out in the nozzle. And what you want to feel, you want a metal to metal feel. You want an abrupt stop. If the stop is like cushioned or soft, you have something in your nozzle and it needs to be cleaned out. But if you just nudge it forward, you're going to get a solid metal to metal feel. And you'll know your needle is seated. You tighten it down. The back of the airbrush back on. And you're back in business. Pretty basic, guys, but if you don't have the basics, you're not going to get anywhere. So there you have it. That's how you clean an airbrush.